Kia ora koutou. He punga wai, he punga tangata. He punga tangata, he punga kōrero. Where the waters meet, people gather and there are rich conversations happening. It is absolutely fantastic that you are here today with a clear purpose of increasing the footprint of native forests across Aotearoa, New Zealand. David Attenborough believes that humans are the greatest problem solvers our planet has ever known, but they're just not ready to apply themselves to the problem of biodiversity loss with the scale and urgency it requires. I know that in Aotearoa we can achieve the seemingly impossible. In 1980, there were only 5 black robins in the world, with just a single breeding pair left. A team of wildlife service staff pushed beyond acceptable practice to cross-foster eggs and young to another species. This led to a comeback for a species that today numbers 300. I've got 2 messages for today. Te mana or te Taiao is the strategy to make the fundamental shift we need for nature, and it will take tenacity and dedication to achieve. All of you here today have a role in realising our vision to have nature thriving by 2050. Leading DOC is an incredible privilege, and our job is to protect and care for unique species, places and heritage, connecting people to these treasures. Our purpose is Papatūānuku Thrives. We manage around a third of New Zealand's land, and the reason I'm showing you our logo is because I think there's a really strong connection to forestry. So it was gifted to us. It's based on the Māori story of creation, and the blue represents Ranganui above, green is Papatūānuku below, and that koru in the middle represents Tane, the god of the forest. And the shield that wraps around it symbolises DOC's role as guardian of New Zealand's nature and conservation areas. Thank you. So one of DOC's responsibilities, next slide, is to work with others to deliver Te Mana o Te Taiao, our biodiversity strategy. It sets the direction for biodiversity to 2050, and it's focused on achieving 5 things. First, ecosystems thriving from mountains to sea. Second, Indigenous species and their habitats across New Zealand are thriving. Third, people's lives are enriched by nature. Fourth, our treaty partners, whānau, hapu and iwi are exercising their role as rangatira and kaitiaki. And 5, prosperity is intrinsically linked with thriving biodiversity. So over the last 35 years, some of DOC's work has been really groundbreaking, and our work makes a difference for biodiversity. For example, there's been some really great progress on some of our iconic bird species. In the past year, 5 species have moved out of nationally critical, that last category before extinction, and none have been added to it. The North Island brown kiwi has moved from at risk, declining to not threatened, and the critically endangered orange-fronted parakeet has increased from 200 to 400 in the wild. And the work and results from predator-free, Jobs for Nature, Project Crimson and our island eradication programs shows that we can work for nature at scale. But DOC can only do so much, and there's nowhere else in the world where the loss of biodiversity is more pronounced than in New Zealand. We have the highest proportion of threatened Indigenous species in the world. So our marine environments are under pressure. I was really shocked when I was in Fiordland last summer and saw bleached sea sponges from the impacts of climate change, and our forests are in trouble too. Browsers, deer and goats are eating our forests. In some places we're on the brink of forest collapse, as you'll see in the photo here. Weeds are spreading further every year. These are the homes for many of our species which continue to decline or are just hanging on, with about 4,000 currently threatened or at risk of extinction. I was really shocked when I found out that stoats, possums and rats are responsible for most of the estimated 26.6 million egg and chick losses for native bird species every year. Two of the major pressures on Indigenous biodiversity are insufficient habitat in lowland areas and declining quality in many of the habitats that remain. Te mana o te Taiao uses the concept of ha'awa whiria, or braided rivers. Different braids of knowledge, value systems and roles cross over and converge occasionally, but they're all leading to the same destination, thriving nature. We recognise that it's critical that we work with whānau, hapu and iwi, integrating mataranga Māori and building resource and capability to protect biodiversity. How we implement the strategy is based around 3 po or pillars. The first is tuapapa, getting the system right. Tuapapa means the ground we stand on, it's our foundations. We need to work out how to put biodiversity protection at the heart of our economic activity. Our focus this year has been on embedding biodiversity into resource management legislative changes and getting a joined-up biodiversity monitoring system so we can actually tell what progress we're making. Next year, I'm looking forward to working with the Aotearoa Circle and businesses on nature-based disclosures that will sit alongside financial and climate disclosures in the future. The second po, whakahau, is all about New Zealanders helping to protect and restore biodiversity. Whaka is to cause and ho is the wind, so causing a lift in where we are, empowering action. We're connected, joined up and building on each other's work. A lot of our focus over the last year has been on predator-free and jobs for nature. These partnerships are capturing people's imagination and leading change. Here in Wellington, that's resulting in us seeing kaka in our gardens again. So what does great collaboration look like in practice? Couple of examples. Over the last decade, we've been working with Fonterra around living waters, and what the work in the Waitaha is a good example. So we're trialling tools and solutions to enable farming freshwater and healthy ecosystems to thrive side by side, and the focus has been on transforming the drain and water network into a healthy freshwater ecosystem in a productive agriculture landscape. We're just starting to look at our next decade of partnerships, and the focus will be around how do we accelerate work together on biodiversity and climate change. Auckland Island is the last island in New Zealand's subantarctic group where mammal pests remain, and we're working with Ngāi Tahu to pave a way to have a really significant predator program so it becomes predator-free. And I'm also really excited about the work that we're doing with Te Whānuia Apanui and Ngāti Porou in the Rokumura Ranges, where we're working together to control 150,000 hectares for pests and looking at habitat and species recovery. And that's one of the forests that was incredibly close to forest collapse that I talked about earlier. So why are you all important? There are 2 reasons. The first one is for the sweep of the subject matter and knowledgeable speakers, participants and guests that have been drawn into this event. And the second is your influence and energy for implementing change that all of you can take as you leave this conference. Everyone who lives in Aotearoa New Zealand has a part to play in helping to restore the Māori of nature for future generations. So the final po in Te Mana o Te Taiao is all around what we do to tackle the direct pressures that are causing biodiversity to decline. So in terms of the forestry sector, I think there's some things that you can really help us with. I know that many of you focus on FSC accreditation. That's really important. You can also think about permanent setbacks from streams and wetlands and think about where you plant so you're not contributing to erosion. And what I would love you to really explore is the forestry industry's responsibility for our significant wilding pine problem. It's costing us a fortune and it's having a huge impact on biodiversity. I'm also aware that what I'm hearing is the relationship between DOC and the forestry sector hasn't always been as strong as it could be. I would really welcome talking more about how we can collaborate to go faster for biodiversity. So finally, if we're going to achieve what's in this strategy, we need people. We need whānau, hapu and iwi, landowners, communities, businesses and individuals to make a collective impact and kickstart the changes needed to reverse the biodiversity crisis. He aha te mea nui o te ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. We need people to care and to get involved to bring it to life. Thank you.
You nearly escaped my questions because I think we've only got time for one or two. But I've got a banger question from John McCarthy, and it might have been from for a previous speaker, but I actually think Penn might be able to give it a good crack. So the Australian government has just agreed on a biodiversity credit. When do we think New Zealand might have one?
Oh, fantastic question. So I think one of the things that you'll see in the emissions reduction plan is a whole chapter on nature-based solutions. That was something that the department is incredibly excited about being in there, and what that gives us is a huge opportunity to really look at how we might do that and more.
Cool. Penny, you know me, I'm really interested in the intersectionality between our climate crisis, our biodiversity crisis, and our biosecurity crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see that connection and what DOC's perspective on that is?
So, as you know, prior to coming into this role, I was at Biosecurity New Zealand, and as I left, my people there reminded me that you can't have biodiversity without great biosecurity, and that's right. As I've come into the department, what I've seen is the impact that climate change is having on our biodiversity. So for the last time last summer, we had Kiwis in the North Island starving because they couldn't get the food that they're used to getting, and that is just going to intensify over the next number of years. So what that means is we have to go faster. And last week I read the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment's latest report. And what he's really challenging us to do is to join up biodiversity, biosecurity and climate change and go faster for bigger impact. And he's right.
Awesome. You mentioned in your speech about some of the progress that we have seen, and one of the reference points you used is that we'd gone from 200 to 400 parrots. Is that good or just less terrible? Like, how many parrots should we be expecting? Do you have hope for the parrots?
So what I see in people, and I've seen it throughout my career, if you just give people doom and gloom, it all just feels too hard and people feel like you can't do anything. So I'm an optimist, and I think we have to build on what we know works and then accelerate it. So that's why I talk about some of the things where we're making progress, because it gives us hope that we can make stuff happen.
Awesome, and I actually do really appreciate that because I was excited about the parrots. That's actually all we've got time for from you, Penny. Thank you so much. I'll take your microphone.